can be a polite response to a favor, or it can be a way to meet life, right?
Action!
Welcome to the Spirit of Yoga. My name is Kirsten.
And Devdas.
From the Akasha Yoga Academy. In today's community Q&A, we'll explore your questions on gratitude. First one, jump into what is gratitude? Devdas, what is gratitude?
This is a fun question. I feel like, in a sense, we all know what gratitude is, but I feel like it can be picked up in maybe a slightly different way that might be useful. My teacher in India had an unusual way of picking up life. He always had a unique take on the things that were happening around him. And one time a man came to, it was actually a neighbor of his, came by one day and said that he was losing his eyesight. And my teacher was, of course, concerned and asking him what's happening. And the man told him. And then my teacher just looked at him and said, "When was the last time you were grateful for your sight? Like, when was the last time you were grateful for seeing?" And the man just kind of like stopped for a minute and he kind of said, "Well, never," basically. And my teacher said, "Go home and every single day, just consciously give gratitude to your eyes." And this man had a kind of long-term debilitating eye condition. And in 3 or 4 months, he passed by my teacher's house again, and it was gone. So, what is gratitude? Gratitude is, or at least can be, an actual healing tool. I think it's healing for the physical body. I also think it's healing for the mind. And I would maybe even go as far as to say it has the potential to be healing for the soul. And it's, I guess, one other thing that I would just immediately add to kind of like spice things up a little bit, let's say, would be, I think words like love and words like gratitude can be a little bit misleading in some sense. I remember even as a child feeling like the word love was really misleading because what I saw was that everybody uses the same word, but everybody's not expressing the same thing. Like, sometimes someone's love is so overpowering, it's just like flowing out to everybody. And sometimes people's love is just like very withheld, and there's not that much that's coming from that. And it always struck me as kind of strange that it's always the same word, because the experience is just so vast and vastly different. And I feel like gratitude is also a similar word in the sense that I feel like, if you just ask your average person walking down the street, "Are you grateful for your life?" Yeah, I'm grateful for my life. Okay, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about profound, loving gratitude, and how to cultivate that in your life and in your experience. So those are my first thoughts. What are your thoughts on gratitude?
Yes, you're talking. I remember that my meditation teacher in the teacher trainings, or not the teacher trainings, the retreats, was always referring to that in English we have one word for love. And I think in Sanskrit there's 12 words for love.
Right.
And every one means a different thing. Or he also brought another example that we have one perception of black, and the Chinese workers in the textile industry, they have 300 different shades of black.
Wow.
And same with gratitude, right?
Wow.
Gratitude can be a polite response to a favor, or it can be a way to to meet life, right? So what you say, I feel is very, very important when it comes to gratitude or such um, open words there, which are defined with so small in our English language in a way,
Yeah.
or so undifferentiated.
Yeah.
Um, as I said, it can be a response, a polite response
Mm.
to a favor, or gratitude can be your medicine,
Yeah.
or gratitude can be your wake up practice.
Yeah.
And is it the same?
Mm.
No, like it's
Mm.
very different. And yeah, what came to me too is like gratitude on one hand, an attitude on the other hand, like a whole frequency, like vibratory frequency, kind of
Interesting.
in which we can attune to and move. And basically gratitude, I feel, when we take it in the depth of what it can contribute spiritually. Gratitude also relates, I feel, to grace, to love, to this unconditional way of meeting life, non-judgmental. Gratitude is, in a more narrow sense, more like a response to something positive, favor. But actually, it can be so much more than that. It can be a way to meet every circumstance of life in a knowing that, or in a trust that life basically provides exactly what is needed, even though in our short term vision that might appear painful and wrong. But in a bigger picture, like that's probably exactly right. So, yeah, gratitude has such an immense
Yeah.
spectrum. I really love that you bring that in here, because it's important that we have that in mind when we talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Also, like I'm interested by your sharing on this topic of that gratitude is also potentially like a vibration or a frequency, and I feel like that's true. But then, how would you go about, like, what are the practical applications to taking your gratitude practice from moments to frequency?
It's a little like other practices too, right? Like meditation. As you start your meditation practice, like it's so focalized into one sitting in time in a way, and kind of really specifically working yourself into opening the door in the sitting into meditation. And as this practice becomes, or this former sitting becomes more frequent and um, more second nature almost, um, you start attuning to this frequency of the state of meditation, and it's not limited to a sitting on a mat for so and so long, but it's possible to touch base with this state, or keep it like um, as an environment, in a way to stay in the environment of the meditative state. And I feel with gratitude, in my experience, it is also in this way. When gratitude is for me a way to open prayer, and I feel the more frequently I'm practicing, the more it spontaneously opens, like throughout the day and not only in this practice. So this is what what I'm saying or what I'm
Mm.
trying to point to, kind of to
Mm.
stabilize basically in the environment of gratitude.
Mm. Beautiful. Beautiful. I mean, I think that's the. I had a kind of a funny conversation once with my teacher in India that was a very strong conversation. We were sitting together, and then just suddenly, out of the blue, he looks at me and he says, "What do you think God wants from you?" And it was a very strong, like, wow, you know, that's a strong question, and I wasn't really so sure what the answer was. Actually, I was just kind of like, wow, I'm not really sure. And I was kind of like contemplating it. And while I was contemplating it, he just looked at me and he smiled and he said, "He wants your blessing." And I felt like that was kind of the last thing that I was expecting that was that was the last thing I was expecting he was wanting. Um, and then he said, this is why I have to be careful. I'll say it again for everybody else. Then he said, most people I won't tell because they'll misunderstand. Like, meaning most people he would not tell them that what God wanted was their blessing because they will misunderstand it.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is that I like felt back into that conversation many times over the years, and I always felt like the essence of it is not actually that God wants your blessing, like you're this great being that has some important blessing to give. It's more like the universe thrives on gratitude. Um, One time, in the case of the life of Yogananda, who wrote this great book, Autobiography of a Yogi, one of the great masters of yoga in the modern world, he, at the end of his life, was having trouble walking. And one of his students was kind of carrying him. And um, he said to the student, "I'm so lucky to have you." And the student said to him, "We're so lucky to have you." And Yogananda said, "It's God serving God. That's his play." Like, and it's kind of almost the same concept, right? It's like there's the sense of reverence and gratitude to life, and that is, in a certain way, a blessing, both for life itself and also for the one who's participating in loving reverence to the play of life.
So, what is gratitude? How would you put it in a nutshell answer?
I mean, it sounds like a very kind of like yogic, impersonal way, but I feel like it's just honoring and respecting the exchange of life. It's like all around us. I think this is something that's fun to contemplate as a yogi. Like, we tend to think of ourselves as being isolated beings, and yet, even we cannot take one breath without interdependence. It's like the trees themselves are giving out, we are taking in, we're giving back out. Like, everything is profoundly interconnected, even just on the physiological level of our breath. Um, but I would say in the energetic level, even more so. It's like in any given day, how many transactions and interactions are happening and cared for by some force, by some unnameable force. And what you want to call that force doesn't really matter, but some profound intelligence is manufacturing life and life experience. And yet people can go through life never acknowledging that. You can choose to go through life one of my teachers jokingly used to call it in the coconut head, Just means like there's this thick coconut up there and you're not seeing anything or experiencing anything outside of just your own mental projection. And, um, and in a strange way, that's profoundly disrespectful, actually. Because without the plants, we are also not breathing. It's like everything is in conscious exchange all the time. And if you don't ever acknowledge that exchange or take a moment to be grateful for that exchange, that in itself could be considered like the hell realm, basically, right? It's like, it's like I'm just isolated and alone, and it will always be this way. And there's suffering. I'm suffering, I'm alone, and it will always be this way. It's like I think that's where the idea of eternal damnation comes from. It's not that it's actually eternal. God, like the divine, loves all the divine's creatures way too much to do anything like that. But there's a sense while you're living it that it's eternal, right? Like while you're the one who's invested in it and feels, it has a sense that can just go on forever. But in fact, that kind of isolated coconut head state is partially happening because there's not a recognition of the interconnectedness of life, right? And the exchange that's happening in life. And I think the more that you recognize the interconnectedness and exchange, the more you just have the sense of, wow, look how amazing life is caring for life, Like, this is kind of a line from the Bible that always touched my heart a lot. Even a sparrow, like the smallest of the birds, it's also being cared for. Everything in life is being cared for, and not by us. Not by our coconut mind, but rather by some profound intelligence. And it's like, okay, it's almost like you could think of it in very human terms. Like, imagine somebody just comes to your house and just showers you with all kinds of gifts, and you just don't even bother to say thank you. It's like, what kind of person is that? Like, that's completely crazy. And yet, without realizing it, I think many people are that way.
Yeah.
It's like they're showered by blessings, they're surrounded by miracles. Their breath is a miracle, like, and yet, how often is it, wow, thank you for this breath, Thank you for this day of being alive. Thank you for the fact that many of the people that I love are still here, also alive, also provided with breath and food and water and everything that they need to live a full and beautiful life. I think, like, as you become more in touch with that, life just starts to look like just the most immense possibility. It's like, billions of human beings. That's not even the sparrows. Like, the sparrows are billions more and billions more and billions more, all being looked after. It's like, what kind of intelligence, can just effortlessly look after billions of beings? And it's relatively easy to see when we come out of the coconut. What's your sense of it? I'm also very curious if you brought it down into one.
Well, you didn't bring it down into one sentence either.
That was just one really
but
long sentence.
yeah, gratitude perhaps is the recognition and like the true recognition of the miracle of life, which is healing, which is a frequency, which is a shift in vibration in a way,
Mm,
which is this hatching out of isolation.
beautiful.
So, what is your personal advice for daily gratitude practice? Devdas, where to start? Like, what's how to practice?
Beautiful. Um, I mean, the fun thing about gratitude is it's kind of like prayer, you know? It's like, in a way, someone can teach you how to pray, and someone can teach you how to be grateful. And in a way, nobody can teach you how to pray, and nobody can teach you how to be grateful because it just comes from your being, it comes from your heart, it comes from your soul. I mean, I find a very powerful practice of gratitude just to, sit and bow your head and make your Anjali Mudra, folded hands, and then just start thinking about what you're grateful for. And, it can start off with kind of things that are closer to you, like relationships or situations that are. But then eventually, I feel like if you really get into that practice, it's just like, wow, like, the sun and like the fact that the plants are living on the sun's energies and, just like it just goes on and on and on into kind of endless. Um, it's as endless as life in a sense, right?
Hmm.
It's like there is no end uh, to the potential of that practice. But then there's so many different ways to approach it. Many people love doing a gratitude journal. Um, I feel like that can be also something very powerful because you look back and then you see, and like it's maybe not the kindest way to describe it, but the egoic mind is like shifting sand, right? It's like it's constantly subtly changing its perspective. And so sometimes when you write something down and then you look back on it, it's like, oh, wow, like it kind
Hmm.
of rekindles in you like a memory of, you know, and, while we're on the topic of journaling, like I never actually kept a gratitude journal because I feel like I have immense, immense, immense gratitude for life, and I prefer more this practice of just keeping it alive in my heart. But I do keep a sadhana journal and a dream journal, and those for me, I think, are not exactly gratitude journals, but they're kind of gratitude journals,
Hmm.
especially the sadhana journal, because I feel like sometimes in sadhana you can have these amazing moments that just like bring intense nourishment and vitality to your spiritual life. Uh, And if someone were to come into you in that moment and say, "Is all life interconnected?" you would just laugh, like, "Yeah, of course. What are
Uh-huh.
you talking about? Look around you. You would have this amazing, profound knowledge of the interconnectedness of life that has given you some experience to give you nutrient and support in your journey. But it's very easy to just forget those
Hmm.
experiences, actually, right? Because, like I said, the egoic mind, the sands of time are shifting and changing, and maybe we're focused on a different thing. And it's not that we have to constantly look back and say like, oh, what did happen to me, but sometimes just a little like memory, and it's just, oh wow, like, and that inspires us so much more to continue the practice, right? It's like, oh wow, I was meditating a lot, and then that's right, I remember, and then wow, wouldn't it be like I should go sit right now, just that sense of the aliveness of the practice. um, and dream journaling, I feel like, is even that, but even maybe more. Like, dreams are so subtle, um, you can easily forget them by the time that morning comes. Like, that's
Yeah.
why they say if you take a dream journal, just keep it on your bedside, and right after you have the dream, you wake up and you write it down, because it's kind of, and it doesn't have to, you can write down every dream, and you can write down the details of every dream, um, but more like what I use it for is the same what I would use for my sadhana journal. It's not like every single time I do sadhana I write it down, but if I feel something came to me that's important on my journey, then I write it down. I say, okay, this is what happened today in sadhana and meditation, this that happened, and that just enough to jog that memory. And in dream life, I would say the same, like, just writing down what happened. And even maybe you don't understand it at the time, but sometimes when you look back later, oh, wow, look at that. Like,
Mm.
this was happening in my life. And, it's like you see the intelligence in which everything is unfolding. Um, and I feel that also is a big inspiration for gratitude, especially in our spiritual life, right? It's like if I look back, if you say, okay, look back on the 10 most important meditations of your life right now, it's like, I'm not sure I can really
Yeah.
do that. But if I'm taking this sadhana journal, then I can look back and say, oh no, like, there have been different points where different things happened that were definitely in my spiritual benefit, or, that were meant to kind of support me in the journey.
Yeah, I remember where I met the first gratitude practice, form of gratitude practice was actually in a monastery, and Thai monastery, in a Buddhist monastery. In a retreat there, a part of the practices was um, food reflection before eating.
Oh wow.
And exactly in this way, like to, pay gratitude, trace back all that's involved in the food you eat, from the cook to the vendor, the vegetable vendor, to the people who were cultivating the vegetable, to the soil and the rain and the sun. And
Mm.
I found
Wow.
that very beautiful because it
Yeah.
exactly ties into the interconnectedness of everything, and
Mm.
the value of food changes so tremendously when
Mm.
tuning into this energy of like what's provided actually.
Yeah.
It's not just gulping down quickly your salad,
Mm.
but like it's a piece of love basically that
Mm.
that's offered. So I found that very, very powerful just before meals to sit down for a moment and to reflect on what's being offered, and
Mm.
to, hold all of that, from the sky to the people to the sun to everything
Mm.
in your heart before
Mm.
eating. So I
Mm.
found that a beautiful first practice
Yeah.
of gratitude. And what I like about it is also we are just eating so regularly, like it
Yeah.
happens 2 times a day, 3 times a day. And it's each time an opportunity, an
Mm.
inbuilt opportunity into the rhythm of the day
Yeah.
to practice, so to speak. So
Yeah.
you don't have to make time or anything. It's just like happening on the go.
Yeah.
And I personally currently kind of consciously um, make space for gratitude in morning prayers and evening prayers, to open the prayer with acknowledgement of all, like with embracing with gratitude um, all that we meet, basically. And I like that too because it's also again inbuilt moments like the day comes to an end, the day starts, to tap into the energy. There are so many different ways we can practice and tap into that. So I hope there was a bit of inspiration for you about how to practice gratitude on a daily basis. What do you think about gratitude? Just this is not a question now, but this is my question about your opinion. Gratitude, how much does it matter to practice that for yourself or to actually also to um, to bring it into your relationships? Basically, a more or less silent, isolated gratitude practice versus bringing that out into
Meaning sharing verbal
yeah,
gratitude with the people in your life and in your
yeah.
community. Um,
Do you feel there's value to that?
I mean, I feel like that's a very, very, very difficult one to say just because personalities are so different.
Huh.
Like, you can have somebody who has profound, loving gratitude for everybody in their life, and maybe they almost never say anything
Mm.
about it. You know, um, recently I was reading a story of one of the modern mystics, and he was saying he felt like his mother was like an incarnation of Divine Mother. Her love was near perfection, like she was just caring for him on almost every way that he would ever have desired. And she never said, "I love you." She didn't have to. It was like, it was in everything that she was doing. Every
Mm.
movement, every service, every word was just, it's like what you said about the frequency. It's just like she
Yeah.
was in the frequency of love. She was just pouring that out. And she never said a word about it. But she didn't have to
Yeah.
because she was in that loving reverence and presence. And I feel gratitude's probably kind of the same. Maybe some people are more outwardly
Hmm.
uh, sharing in that way and some less, but it's not necessarily an indicator of how much gratitude is
No.
inside.
Yeah.
Um, and that's in a weird way also why I feel like what I said earlier about prayer. It's like you can teach somebody to pray and you cannot teach somebody to pray because that's the inner that's like the inner communion almost, right?
Hmm.
It's like it's your inner way of connecting to the root of the divine inside your own heart. Like, who can tell you what that looks like? You know, it's like other people can support you in that process, but they can't make something happen inside you. That has to happen inside you. Um, in that way, I guess you could say the same thing about meditation, right? It's like
Mm.
someone
Yeah.
can teach you how to meditate. They can say, here's, try this technique, see if it works. But they cannot actually put you in that state of meditation necessarily. Um, there has to kind of be discovery on your side. There has to be some openness on your
Yeah.
side to discover. And then as there's more openness, you discover. Um, that said, there's something nice about also honoring people in your life verbally,
Mm.
if that's right with your personality type.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, like I'm so grateful for our community. Uh, really, like it's never ending for me. Every single time I'm on a Zoom call, every single time I'm connected to people, I just am like, wow, like
Mm.
it's so amazing. It's so beautiful to be in the company of great yogis and be part of their journey and their search. It's for me a never-ending source of inspiration.
Mm. We just touched on prayer, and there is a question exactly about that. Can you please elaborate on prayer and gratitude? They seem to be related.
This is for you, I think.
You think so?
Yeah,
I
because you were
wanted to
saying
hear
about your
you.
morning and evening prayers. You start. I'll go later.
I wanted to hear you, but okay, let's go. um, prayer is, for me, also, we said like there's many different approaches to prayer, and nobody can really teach you how to do or like do that for you. Basically, it's a process that we develop very personally to our typology. And for me, prayer is almost a conversational, not mentally conversational, but a conversational way to tune into divine essence in a way. And for me, that starts with this deep gratitude and acknowledgement of the magnificence of the divine of life. So for me, how does prayer and gratitude relate? It is that gratitude is to tune into the gratitude, into this acknowledging of the interconnectedness of being and life, um, is kind of creating a certain vibratory frequency. I feel that opens the door for an exchange, an energetic exchange, not energetic, divine exchange, almost how form and formlessness meet, basically. And prayer is basically the entry to that, or is the yeah, it's the tuning of the frequency to be able to come into that divine exchange of form and formless.
So the difference between prayer and gratitude has to do with the form and the formless. What is the exact?
No, no. Um, Even though, in a sense, also yes, because of course, also different shades of gratitude. We have been speaking about that before. But for me, as a beginning of a prayer, gratitude comes more from form,
Mm,
um,
yeah.
from form, and it is a door opening into formless.
Mm. Yeah, that's the. My teacher in India was fond of saying, "See the formless in the form," and this is, I think, a very, very, very powerful, beautiful reminder. And in a weird way, it's like that's this greeting in its entirety, right? It's like the formless in me bows to the formless in you. The divine in me bows to the divine in you. That's the play of one and many. Um, and prayer is it's like a very difficult thing to put correctly into words. I feel like I mean, usually it starts for people in a more conversational way, and that's actually good. I remember I was telling the story the other day about a friend of mine came to Italy, and we were. This is a kind of a story that's about, well, about many different things, but one of which is letting go of expectation. We were running up and down this hill full of sunflowers, and it was really like a mountain, a giant field of sunflowers. We're running up and down this mountain full of sunflowers in Italy, and my friend lost his phone, and that was in the day when there was no phone backup. Like, he didn't have any backup in it. He was an entrepreneur, and he had all of his business contacts in his phone, and he was, completely distraught. And I said to him, okay, anything is possible. Like, don't believe for a second that you cannot find your phone. Like, if that's what's intended to happen in this moment. Like, let's just sit down, get quiet for a minute, and you figure out what you want to communicate. So we sat down in the middle of this field, and then he made this. This is, I feel like, the early stages of the divine journey, because he made really a bargain with the divine. He was like, okay, if you find my phone, I'll give this much money to a charity. And he had all these kind of conditions that he was gonna set. And so I said, okay, good. Now we sat down, we found our silence, we communicated. Now let's see what happens. So we go back up on the mountain, and we're looking around for the phone, and nothing, like cannot find. He stops. He says, you know what? I think I just have to accept the fact that it's gone. And he steps forward, and he steps on the phone in this giant field of sunflowers. It's like, I have to accept that it's gone. It's right there. And I feel like if you're not yet knowledgeable about possibility, that's a good place to start. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like you've gone from nothing is possible in this situation to something is possible, and having that come through acceptance, probably on several different levels. But I think as you work higher and higher and higher in prayer, it's more like what you were talking about earlier. Like, if there is a conversation, it's a very subtle kind of conversation, and it's just more like a journey inward to be in touch with that part of life, not our life, but life, the larger life, to be profoundly in touch with that in that aspect of our own hearts. And many times, if you really are in the like active space of the divinity, even the question that you thought you came with, or the prayer that you thought you wanted answered, it's just not there, because you are life, and you're receiving kind of directly what you need. And often there's some discrepancy between what we think we need, mm-hmm, and what we actually need. And so we come, okay, I think I need this, and then we come into prayer, and then we discover, wow, maybe that wasn't even what I came for. Maybe I came for something completely different. And that's just kind of revealed in the radiance of what we are and who we are, and the connection to the profound intelligence of life.
So I feel prayer definitely is kind of a space where form and formlessness touch surfaces. We talked about this. It is something in a way conversational, or this is where it starts and ends more in silence. So I feel for me a big aspect is also this a surrender, basically this surrendering the form into formlessness.
Yeah.
Kind of to surrender individual identity into the formless, but in a way also the formless shapes and guides the form. So it is really a meeting point of shape and shapelessness and surrender of the shape, but more the surrender of the individuality of shape, not the shape itself in a way, because the shape I feel is for me experientially in prayer becoming part of the shapeless in a way, but staying shaped. So it is more like the separation that the power of prayer can wash away, or the isolation that shape usually implies. So prayers I find a very, very beautiful and powerful place where shapelessness and shape meet.
Yeah, that's the that's the interesting thing. Like, there is no division between any of the aspects of who we are. Like, this is something that I've really contemplated a lot lately, that in yoga there is no word for mind. Like the Western concept that your mind is up here. In yoga, that's a body, and that's just one of your many bodies, and that's just part of who you are. And like the concept, okay, my mind is here and my body's here and my spirit's here. It's just not true at all from a yogic perspective. It's their one integrated experience. And that's something so beautiful, actually. Like the because I think for most people there is kind of a division. Like, if we were to set any division from the yogic standpoint, we would say the more subtle the level that you're working on, the more powerful. And that is observable even in material life. Like, what's the most potent, energetic form, one of the most potent forms of making energy that we have on this planet? You take one invisible atom and you smash it into another invisible atom. So you've taken two things that are so subtle that they cannot be seen, and you've mashed them into each other, and this massive release of energy happens. It's like, well, what does that mean? It means that the more subtle, the more profound, the more strong, the more energetic. And that's, of course, the opposite of the materialist way of looking at life, right? Which is the more you can touch something, the more evident it is. But from a yoga standpoint, that's just not true. Like, we would actually in some ways say the opposite, right? Like, if I'm profoundly in touch with some side of me that's more subtle than the physical, well, the physical one day will no longer be here. right? The physical form came from the earth; it will return to the earth. Um, but the but something will still be here when that form is gone, and that's part of the process of the yoga experience, right? Is like, okay, if if that day is today, if I shed this body today, what is left? Can I sit in meditation? Can I identify something is going to go, something is not going to go? What's not going to go? And that's a very well, that's the science of Jnana Yoga. That's what happened to Ramana Maharishi, right? Ramana was okay. He was just overcome. For those that don't know the story of Ramana, he was overcome by this fact that he felt he was going to die. And it was so clear that he lied himself down on the ground so that when his family found him, it would be convenient to carry him to the burning ghat. So he's lying down on the ground, and that's it. It's finished. What's finished? Who am I? Am I this body? And just the whole problem was solved.
And that at very young age, 16.
16.
Beautiful. I love your guys' questions. I love the conversation on the different shades of gratitude, on how to bring that into our lives and into practice. And also, I really loved how we touched into prayer as well. Like, that was beautiful sharing, beautiful questions. Thank you so much. This was Wisdom in Motion with the Akasha family. Keep shining in the spirit of yoga.